receptors are on that side of the equation. Okay. Any impact of physical activity on the cardiovascular system? Again, how soon can we have kids participating in relatively vigorous physical activity to try to train the cardiovascular system? Is it good for it, or again, should we just wait, or it's actually not good? So in terms of fitness, cardiac size and genetics are not linked when we test at rest. Okay. And we're going to compare genetics. We're going to use twins. So they were using 6 and 8-year-old twins. Resting cardiac size, no relationship between the two. So the genetic influence was not related to their heart size. When we move to submaximal exercise, significant genetic influence on the increased left ventricular dimension. This was older twins, it's more in an adult age. Again, no difference at rest in the internal dimension of the left ventricle, but there was a similarity in the wall thickness. And so they found, through a variety of studies, cultural and familial influences are more critical to heart size than genetics. So there were greater relationships between siblings than twins. And some of that can be the activity. Again, am I know twins? Are they exactly the same? Their physical activity, right? I mean, sometimes you can have a twin that does resistance training and the next side anaerobic training, and one does aerobic training, and one do a sport that's more on that side or the other side. So some of it can be just what you do, but when we actually look at the genetics, that's not a factor that's influencing heart size. Can they adapt? So that was related to fitness, just a measurement of it. Can they adapt? And a positive, yes. We'll see similar patterns in relative magnitude of response to progressive sustained dynamic activity. So we'll see increases in mitochondria, increases in capillaries, enzymatic changes on the same relative magnitude. And so what that tells us is we don't have to be at a certain level of biological maturity to begin to begin to try these activities and have them engage in that type. So we don't have to wait until puberty or beyond for the biology to be there to support these. It happens as we start to train. Cardiac output is one of our key factors for the ability to perform endurance type activities, and it's two factors, heart rate and stroke volume. Stroke volume is going to increase to match cardiac output to the body size. But heart rate is responsible for energy expenditure relative to the size. So again, they've got a smaller pump, so even if they're squeezing out more blood, it's still not enough. We need more beats. Right? And so that means we need to use a different equation for them to determine their estimated maximal heart rate. What's a typical equation you use for maximal heart rate estimation? 220 minus h. Right? For kids between the ages of 6 and 14, we're going to use 208 minus 70% of their age. Okay? So again, even if you do just something simple, we say a 6-year-old, right? What would be a 6-year-old's max heart rate? Using the other formula. All right, 220 minus age. Okay. Now let's do the formula. 208 minus 6 times 0.7. It's going to be 4.2. All right. Okay. So it's quite a bit different, right? If I'm using a 6-year-old and I say, well, we're going to do 80% of your max, and I use this number, that's going to be significantly higher than this number, right? So if you're working with individuals in that age group, you do want to use this estimation versus the 220 minus age. Okay. Any questions with cardiovascular? All right, let's move to the respiratory. What differences do we see in children in the respiratory system? Well, at any given VO2, any oxygen consumption level, their respiration is going to be higher. And so their ventilatory equivalent is going to decrease as the age. And that's your minute ventilation divided by the oxygen uptake. Right? So numerator is ventilation. Denominator is oxygen uptake. As we age, the numerator gets smaller. So I'm dividing a smaller number. And so that's how the equivalent decreases. The respiratory rate is higher. And I put this quote in because it kind of summarizes it. The ventilatory efficiency of children is lower than adults and adolescents in a large part because of shallow, rapid breathing that results in higher dead space and lower alveolar ventilation. Okay. And those of you who had physiology of exercise, we talked about that, right? Did breathing exercises to try to get you to fill the lung. But they breathe really high, right? Dead space is where there's no exchange. So we have an anatomical dead space, the bronchi, all the way down, right? That just carries air. But if I don't fill the whole lung, I have a greater dead space, right? Where there's no exchange. Again, we relate this, or kind of relate the concept to the underwater weighing. We're going to expel all of your air, right? But we always have some leftover residual air. Well, they have a lot of space. Right? They don't fill the whole lung, so that's how. So, again, if you're working with kids, focus on deep breaths. Right? In through the nose, out through the mouth, fill the lung. And again, you can teach that relatively young. And as the other parts of the body catch up physiologically, they'll have that worked out. In terms of protection and what we see with exercise, a lower PCO2 set point in children. PCO2 is the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. When it reaches a certain level, we increase ventilation because we need to get rid of CO2, right? We don't want CO2. So the set point is where that kicks in. For kids, it's lower. And And so that means it's lower at anaerobic threshold as well as peak exercise. And it's one of those adaptations, we don't want them to get high levels of CO2. We don't want anybody to, but we don't want them to, and so we start to increase greatly. In terms of PO2, the resting PO2 is a little bit lower. Normally it's about 100, so a little bit less. And at exhaustion, 84. Usually we keep that pretty well maintained. Again, you'll learn more about these systems in the physiology of exercise class, but we also talk about elite athletes. They can get down into the 60s, and that's when they become hypoxic. So we're seeing lower levels at rest and also at exhaustion. Okay. All right. That's all of our maturation. Do you have any questions with that? We're just going to do a few slides on qualitative analysis. And then we'll do. Okay. Relatively, there aren't very many questions on this, but there are a couple. Okay. Not going to spend a lot of time on this. Usually it's sort of the introduction to the last day, but kinesiology, we started out with this on the first day. What is it? Well, it's a study of human movement. But it's also replaced physical education as a term. Right? So again, 40 years ago, you all would have been in a physical education program. Right? There was no sport management, sport psychology, physical therapy. There was none of that. Everyone was in physical education. And then they went into those professions, but we didn't have those subdisciplines. So now, and even I think most of you weren't here, but our department used to be the Department of Physical Education. Now it's the Department of Kinesiology and Sport. Okay? So it's brought into not just the study of the movement, but it's been a global term, and now there's even kinesiology tape, right? I don't know why they call it that. So other disciplines that might fit into there would include these. We do not have in our department athletic training or physical therapy, but we do have strength and conditioning coaching, physical education teaching, and then kinesiology in general is like a fitness type. Yep.
This is just a silly side note. For the kinesiology type, that's just strictly branding, isn't it?
Kind of like putting a big word on something and
That's
people
what I
not
thought.
knowing what it is.
Well, my girlfriend went to the chiropractor the other day. She had a herniated disc, long story short, and he's been putting that on her lower back. And she's thinking it's some crazy,
As far as I know, it's not
crazy
magic.
tape. And when I ran a half marathon, I used it on my knees, which I feel like it helps. It's just like mobile tape, but that's what it is.
Yep.
Probably have better luck selling than saying kinesiology tape and say
Tape.
mobile tape or
I mean,
stretcher tape.
I mean, tape in and of itself has very little value, right? Especially if you had your ankle taped, it was worthless in 6 minutes. And then they've done the studies, right? It starts to sweat, you start to sweat, it becomes more pliable. It used to be, oh, I can barely move my ankle. Now I can move my ankle again, all right? So what's different about this? I don't know the exact difference. But if it is more mobile, I mean, I've seen athletes like taped head to toe. Like if they take it off, your arm gonna fall off, your leg gonna fall off. I mean, what? So it's sort of like the breathe rights to me, right? Makes people feel better, placebo effect, but actual impact on performance or limitation of injury or anything like that, I'm not exactly sure, right? Because you said it's pliable, right? So it's not like a brace, it's not like a shoulder brace that doesn't allow me to lift up here, because if I get above here, then I hurt, right? And you don't see those a lot, but sometimes like offensive linemen, they don't need a big range of motion for their arms. So they'll pretty much put it down to the side. That's a brace. Right? That doesn't limit it. Or if you had a knee brace, they can fix the angle so it only moves so much. So you might, the tape just does whatever. So I'm not sure. Anybody else have more information on technology tape?
Yeah, KJ is supposed to, I've never researched it, this is from going, I'm certainly a physical therapist, it's supposed to act as a tendon, like adding an external tendon. And I used it around my knee a lot because it dislocated, and I put it here. It kind of helps. I mean, it's not supposed to be a miracle cure-all, but I think there's a big placebo effect with it.
And that's what I mean. How much effect does it have? Right? Because that's the idea. Same with tape. Right? You tape your ankle to limit range of motion. Right? So if it's injured or to prevent it from being injured, right? But when it loses that ability, then it's nothing. So the idea is to be protective or limit further injury, right? By maintaining a smaller range of motion or support. It's just how much. Right? With this, you'll see the word coach. And I think we're all coaches, right? Anybody disagree with that? All right, what do coaches do? Get people to do stuff that they don't necessarily want to do. Right? Help them improve their performance. What does a physical therapist do? Right? What does a personal trainer do? What does a PE teacher do? Right? So I see all as coaches. So when we talk about qualitative analysis, and that's what we're going to discuss, we use that to make judgments on technique, strategy, and team selection. Again, how can we apply that to something else? Right? What techniques am I going to use? Well, that can be a physical therapist. That can be a personal trainer. What strategies? What kind of planning am I going to do? Team selection. Right? This might be testing. I identify who's going to be on the JV or the varsity, or which research, or if I want to research 2 different rehab protocols. I'm going to put you in this one that's more aggressive, this one a little less aggressive, and see what happens. So it can be applied to all of those realms that you may be interested in. What is it? A couple of key words in this. Systematic observation. Intervention and performance. And again, that can be applied to any of the worlds that you want to enter. I've got to observe it. I have to have a little bit of a background, so that's the introspective judgment of what level the person is performing it at, the quality, and then provide the most appropriate intervention to help them improve their performance. What it is not is just eyeballing. And unfortunately, we see this a lot. Example I use for this, and we'll use the software, is Dartfish. Familiar with Dartfish? Probably have seen it if you watch the Olympics and they do the overlays. So like on the ski races, they'll have the 2 ski racers, and then they'll have them over the top of each other, and they'll say, oh, this is where that one took too wide of a turn, and now they're ahead. Or diving, they'll put the 2 exact same dives, and they'll overlay those. That's Dartfish. Okay? So that's the software. But they were doing their presentation on the software, and the example they gave was they had Anna Kournikova, tennis player, right? Serving. Serves 10 balls, coach goes over and says, your toss isn't high enough. You need to have a little bit higher toss. Okay, so let's work on the toss for these next 10. And they're videotaping, the Dartfish people are videotaping. And so she does 10 more serves, and they were better, and the coach says, see, I told you. It was your toss. You just had to work on your toss a little bit. You go back to the video, was the toss any different? Right. Put a little line across the screen where the first 10 tosses were. Watch the next 10. Toss was exactly the same. So that wasn't the problem, right? So is that good coaching? The problem's going to come back up because that wasn't what needed to be fixed. So we can use technology to help us with gathering, organizing, giving meaning to sensory information. We can use slow motion. We're going to use a high-speed video camera to be able to look at motions in really slow speeds, 240 frames per second. Okay? A typical video camera is about 30. So we're going to pick up quite a bit of information about being able to do that. Second part is you give feedback. Feedback was poor, right? You said toss it higher. Well, she didn't toss it higher. She tossed it the exact same height. It's not good feedback, right? But we want to make a correction that will change the environment. And lastly, we want to achieve the goal. So we want to do this efficiently, right? And the one that I point to this is like a pitching coach in baseball, softball. They can't go out there and give them a 10-minute speech on what they need to fix. It's not allowed in the game. The umpire is going to be out there in a minute to say, hey, let's speed this along. So we've got to observe what we think's going on. We've got to give good feedback to try to achieve that goal immediately. Right? Now, some goals, we can take quite a bit of time. Right? If I'm teaching someone to walk again, that's not going to happen the next day. But if I waste time by not identifying what their problem is, I'm not being efficient, and it's going to take them longer to be able to return to walking. Right? So, oops. All right, so that's the end of that. We're just going to knock out one more slide. Okay, ready to answer? Kinesiology is studying of what? B, movement. Which is not a judgment a coach would make in QLA. Success, right? We're not making a judgment on how successful they'll be. Which is not one of the 3 descriptors. Application, right? Only eyeballing. False. Which subdiscipline do we not offer in our department? Athletic training. Okay. Well, we're going to do 2. 2 slides. Okay, so.
Go ahead and catch those off.
Maybe. Might apply them to the test. Okay, so we're going to go through these 3 scenarios to think about how you would do this. Okay, you have a younger athlete who drops a fly ball because they try to catch it like this. What do you do? Fly ball like this.
So tell them if you do that again, the next time it's going to pop you in the face.
Well, they already got popped in the face like 4 times. They know what's going to happen. How do I get them to not do that?
demonstrate.
Okay, I've done that.
You've done that?
Yeah, I've shown it, like this. Put your glove up like this.
Tell them to pretend they're grabbing the sun.
Okay, now we're getting there. Right? Got to create a story for them. We've got to change it, right? Again, this is young. Right? We saw the 5-year-old. We talked about a 5-year-old, right? Catching the ball. It's not very common, but they catch it frequently. Right? The percentage of drop is pretty high, and even when you get to 8 years old, it's sometimes luck. Just put your glove out, and hopefully the ball lands in it. Okay? So, how do I get there? I'll buy that.
Like you're waving,
All right.
you don't want to wave like this. Tell them, wave like this.
Okay. So we got the glove position down, right? Now how do we catch the ball? Now we got our glove up here, but we're still missing it.
So you're grabbing the cookie out of the sky.
Okay. Eventually I gotta throw a ball at him again, right? So what can we do with those? These are all steps. We just don't have time to go through all of those, right? You can have 100 different ways. And that's what leads us into the last part of this class is how do you get people to learn when they don't have a good feeling or what you typically use to describe something doesn't work, right? They're not getting it. So, yes, that's another way. But what can I do with the actual ball and catching? To make it easier for them to catch, what can I do?
Make them not have to move to get it.
All right. Probably want to stand pretty close. Essentially throw it into their glove so they get some confidence. Might help.
Don't throw it too high.
Right.
Or, and don't put it like in where the sun's in their eyes, maybe facing away from the sun to start out until they get a little more advanced.
Yep. How about if I throw something that doesn't come back down to earth as fast as a ball? A wiffle ball, beach ball, balloon, scarf, something where that they recognize it's above their head and they do this and they move a little bit, but it's not coming down so fast, right? And then we back up. And then we start to get them to move. And then we get to a game. All right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the observation, the feedback, and try to do it in a relatively efficient manner. Okay, next one, a little different environment. Client comes in complaining of pain in their knee after a therapy session they completed the day before. What do you do?
Ask them what happened in their session before.
All right. Absolutely, right? Did you do any new exercises? Did you feel it during the session? Or was it after the session? Was it immediately like, oh, and you just didn't say anything? Or was it like 20 minutes later that you felt something? What else?
What'd you do the rest of the day?
Okay. Did it happen outside? Why is it important to differentiate between those two?
Because it could have been something that they kind of caused away from the therapy.
Right. We want to change the therapy if the therapy's bad. If the therapy isn't bad, we want to change their behavior outside, right? Well, you shouldn't have done that, right? Remember we talked, don't do that. That slow your progress, that'll cause more pain. We're here, we're in a controlled environment. But if it's bad in the training session, right, something happened there, then we want to change that exercise out, right? Oh, I felt it when we did the one-legged balances, right? That's where I felt it. Oh, maybe we're not ready for a one-legged balance. Maybe we need to do a one-legged balance with arm support, okay? So you definitely want to differentiate between that. What else?
Identify what part of their knee that the pain is coming from.
Sure, right? Where's the pain? How much pain is it, right? Maybe it's just normal, right? Maybe it's just a normal soreness. Again, maybe we've upped it a little bit. We did 2 sets instead of 1, so we get a little more soreness to it. And it's something we need to keep an eye on. but also the location, right? If you've never had pain in that area before, it may be something new, right? Maybe, again, we got into a position that the knee is not ready for, and so we want to modify that. Okay, good. All right, so A, we want to ask a lot of questions. We also want to observe and see what they've been doing in the training as well as outside. Okay, last one. This is more for a performance type. Athlete is trying to improve his or her jumping ability. What do you do?
Some lower leg activities, such as like plyometrics,
What would I do first before that?
Faster than normal routine.
Okay, what else?
Ask their
First.
goals, how high do they want to jump, how far do they want to go, if it's achievable.
All right.
See how high they can jump.
We want to test them first. If you say, I want a 40-inch vertical, and you jump 19 inches, what are we going to do?
lower that goal.
We'll be honest, right? We're not going to take your money and say, oh yeah, I'll get you a 22-inch increase in your vertical. Nah, that's a lie, right? That's not going to happen. Let's be more realistic. Second part of that, and sort of related to the goal part, is what's the purpose, right? There's no vertical jump world champion as far as I know. So what type of jumping are you trying to do? What's the purpose of the jump? Okay? And then we want to watch them jump, right? Maybe they have poor form, right? Maybe it's something technique related. And then, once we've done all those, then we give them specific exercises, right? What else goes into how high you can jump other than strength?
Leg length.
All right, some anatomical things, right? Some levers might help us. Again, we can't change that, right? We can't stretch the leg down. What else?
It said like the joints, and how long the muscles are.
Okay. So related, right? What else?
Kind of technique, a lot of like foot positioning, going up, like jump off one leg, jump off two legs. Some people are better with one or the other. I know some people are better jump off their left leg and now the right leg.
Yep. The question is the person who squats the most the person who jumps the highest? Why not? What's power? What typically hinders the person who squats the most in that equation? The mass, right? We can both squat 500 pounds, right? If I weigh 400 pounds, and you only weigh 300 pounds, I'm going to jump higher than you, right? Because I only weigh 300, you weigh 400, right? So it's a resistance. So sometimes, simple as that, right? Hey, let's try to get your